This is the story of Christiaan Huygens in 10 minutes. Christiaan Huygens was born on April 29, 1629, in The Hague, Netherlands. He was the son of a Dutch naval captain and one of 7 children. His father died when Christiaan was just 2 years old, so he grew up in poverty. His mother remarried, and they moved to a small village called Voorburg. Christiaan didn't have enough money for college, but he was smart and hardworking, so he taught himself mathematics. And in 1645, at the age of 16, he entered the University of Leiden as a physics student. But while there, he befriended some astronomers and switched his major to astronomy. He graduated in 1648 with a master's degree in both physics and mathematics. After graduating, he returned to The Hague to work as a mathematician and scientist for the Dutch government. But soon after, he left that job and moved back to Leiden, where he spent 3 years studying optics and developing theories about the nature of light. In 1654, he published his first paper about the properties of light. It was an instant success and established him as one of the most important scientists in Europe. In 1657, he accepted a job offer from the French king and moved to Paris, which at the time was the center of scientific research in Europe. There, he became friends with other famous scientists like René Descartes, Pierre de Fermat, and John Wallis. Huygens worked on many projects for the French king, including designing a machine for measuring the speed of light. This project was unsuccessful, but it inspired him to do something no scientist had ever done before: measure the speed of light. In 1659, he traveled to the French town of Gassin to conduct his experiment. There, he used mirrors to split a beam of light into 2, and then measured the time it took for the light to travel between them. His experiment showed that the speed of light was about 200,000 times faster than the speed of sound. This discovery was a shock to scientists, because until now, they didn't know how fast light traveled. They had no idea that the distance to the sun was about 150 million kilometers or 93 million miles. And they had no idea that the moon was 384,000 kilometers or 238,000 miles away. But now that they knew the speed of light, they could calculate these things. Scientists started calling Huygens the father of modern optics. And in 1666, he was elected to the Royal Society, the highest honor a scientist could receive at the time. But despite all his accomplishments, he never made much money. So in 1669, he left France and returned to the Netherlands. There he accepted a job offer from the wealthy English Lord Francis Cuscus, who had heard about Huygens' amazing work in optics. Huygens arrived in England in 1669 and immediately began working on his new project, designing a telescope that could measure the parallax of stars. Parallax is an apparent shift in the position of an object when viewed from different locations. For example, if you hold your finger in front of your face and close one eye, then switch which eye is closed. You will notice that your finger appears to jump from one side to the other. This is because the position of your finger is being viewed from 2 different locations, your right eye and your left eye. Astronomers have been wanting to measure the parallax of stars for centuries, because if they could measure it, it would mean they knew the distance to those stars. But it was impossible because the baseline, which is the distance between 2 points of observation, was too small. To measure star positions, astronomers needed a much larger baseline. Huygens had the perfect solution for this problem. Instead of measuring the parallax of stars from Earth, he would measure it from space. To do this, he designed a spacecraft that would consist of 2 connected sheds. Each shed would contain a telescope that pointed towards Earth. By measuring the angle between the 2 lines of sight, the crew could calculate the distance to the stars. But it wasn't easy. The spacecraft had to be able to stay in orbit around Earth for several months, which had never been done before. Also, it had to be able to carry enough supplies for the crew to survive for months in space, which had also never been done before. Finally, it had to be able to land safely on Earth, which again had never been done before. But Huygens was up to the task. He spent years working on the project, designing every part of the spacecraft from scratch. And in 1674, the English government funded his project and construction began. But there were many delays. One day, while Huygens was inspecting the spacecraft, he noticed that the metal parts were corroding. He had to stop construction and spend years redesigning the spacecraft using stronger materials. Then, just as it was finished, a storm destroyed the launch tower. Again, he had to stop and spend more years redesigning the spacecraft to be more resistant to the elements. Finally, in 1678, the spacecraft was completed and it was launched. But something went wrong. As the spacecraft was leaving Earth's atmosphere, the crew lost contact with mission control. They had no way of knowing if the spacecraft was on course or not. Days turned into weeks, and still there was no word from the crew. The world waited anxiously for news of the mission, but it was never to come. The spacecraft was never seen again. Huygens was devastated by the loss of his spacecraft, but he refused to give up. He continued to work on his theory of light, and in 1678, he published his most famous work, Treatise on Light, where he proposed that light was made up of tiny particles that he called corpuscles. This theory was revolutionary, and it completely changed the way scientists thought about light. Unfortunately, it was also wrong, but Huygens didn't know that. He continued to work on his theory, and in 1690, he published another book, Further Investigations on Light and Color. In it, he described how his theory could explain things, like rainbows and why the sky is blue. But by this time, Christiaan Huygens was very sick. He had been suffering from a mysterious illness for years, and it was getting worse. He died on July 8, 1695. At the age of 66, he was buried in the Dutch city of Delft, next to his wife and children. At the time of his death, he was one of the most respected scientists in the world. His work had changed the way we understand light forever. But despite all his accomplishments, he was virtually unknown outside of scientific circles. Most people had never even heard his name. But that would change in the 19th century, when Romanticism was in full swing. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the great geniuses of the past. And one of the first people they came across was Christiaan Huygens. He became known as the father of modern optics and one of the greatest scientists of all time. And today, we remember him for his incredible contributions to science. Thank you for watching this video. If you want to learn more about Christiaan Huygens, I have put some resources in the description below. And if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe. I have lots more videos about the history of science and mathematics coming out every month. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.